Games, boards games. I might be talking about board games, but I'm not gonna shout. Today I'm going to talk about how I personally make a game. What's my method for creativity? And I guess I'll try to talk you through my methods. It might work for you, but then again, maybe it will not. But this is my method, and it's the one I got. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I am Bez. It's 10 a.m.ish UK time for Bezzy Beats and Board Game Blether. And yeah, today I don't have a guest. Didn't have a pre-made thing. I asked people on Twitter, what should I talk about? Should I talk about how I make games? Should I talk about finding your crowd? And yeah, 5 people said we want you to talk about making games. 5 people said we want you to talk about your marketing process and finding a crowd. And 1 person said, yeah, both are interesting to me. I was surprised that no one said neither are uninteresting to me, so that's good, I guess. So yeah, I decided to, so this is what I'm doing today. I wrote a bunch of notes, you can see it from the bottom, but I will go into these things and hopefully it will be worth listening. Basically, I make an increasing number of decisions. I'm not saying my games get increasingly better, but what I'm saying is that there's a constant increase in how many decisions I've made. I get closer. I decide, okay, this is what the game's okay, this is, and then it becomes more and more concrete in my mind. And there's an increasing number of aspects that I think this is definitely the case. There's an increasing number of aspects where I think this is probably the case, because as time goes on, of course, it's, for me, game design is about the iteration and the increased awareness of the possibility space and working out exactly where I want to be on that possibility space, if that makes sense. But before we get to that, let's talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights. Recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. Did a little bit of work for preparing for Essen. That was pretty much it. Yeah, I didn't have a super productive day yesterday. Trying to get some stuff done. Yeah, I read stuff on the internet. I've been looking up Magic the Gathering. I'm quite excited about the new unsets. I do like things that push the boundaries of stuff, and so silver bordered Magic as it used to be known, but now of course there's no silver, there's only black borders now. But yeah, let's call it wacky Magic. The unsets, like, I really like that they're pushing the boundaries. Also, Daybreak got released yesterday. Cool game. Yeah, I hope it does really well. I would love there to be an upswelling in demand, because what that game tells me is that this would be a problem that we could solve, but only if all the governments work together. If all the governments work together, then maybe we will be able to solve it. If they actually treat it seriously, we should be able to do this. But if they don't work together, then we're not going to be able to do it. And frankly, given that, yes, we managed to get a vaccine for COVID in record time, but I'm not super hopeful. But that's me, and I'll speak to Matteo at some point in the future about that all. But yeah, wandering around, drinking my coffee that I've got a subscription to right now. Yeah, lots of coconut milk. That's my highlights. Let's crack on. And brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? I'm going to say the brilliant thing of the day is paper. I mean, I've talked about paper before, but I think it's worth repeating. I mean, paper can be of various densities, you draw on it, just something that you make marks upon, and it's so pleasing, whether it's with a paintbrush, a pencil, and I think watercolour is brilliant in its application, but like paper, as long as it's FSC certified, you don't need to be ashamed of using up a whole bunch of paper. It's relatively benign to the environment. Pencils and paper, it's good, and like there's some joy in feeling the paper. I mean, even the most, like, this is thicker paper, especially for watercolor, but even no matter the paper, I mean, this is cheaper paper and there's a lovely tactile quality. I just enjoy it. Oh yeah, feel that paper. Okay, in all seriousness, as always, feel free to comment, ask questions, and do the whole fun like follow thing. But the reason that I do these things live is because I would love people to ask questions along the way. And hello, Bodhi, it is lovely to see you. And yeah, it's been a while. Are you jumping in because of today's topic? Have I known a board game to use interesting paper? Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I will say that there are some manuals. We were actually geeking out about them on Tuesday when I was at Buzz and Meeples, and then saying, oh yeah, tapestry, that's really nice quality, and then Too Many Bones, just the quality of the paper that they've got. Like, I've seen nice paper on the cards. I mean, there's lots of different finishes. I personally like a bit of texture. I mean, I've got the linen finish where it goes on a big roller thing, and yeah, I like that texture, but I've never known it to be done in a mechanically meaningful way, if you know what I mean. So I've seen it done in a way that adds an extra tactile quality, but I've never known it to be done in a mechanically meaningful way. Bodhi says, it's been a while, just good timing. I saw the notification pop up, thought I'd pop in to listen. Well, thank you for being here. And hello, Elaine. Am I one of those people who sniffs books too? I'm not saying I will. Oh, actually, I should talk about this. Just give me about 10 seconds. I'm back. I want to talk about a comic that I got just today. This is a comic, I think it's from 1953. For those who don't know, Osamu Tezuka, I'm going to go back to the recent highlights because that's the way we roll here. We are chaotic. So Princess Knight, I was given the first volume of a 2-volume edition by my friend. Yeah, and this is, I believe this might be the first time it's put into one single volume. It is quite thinly printed. So Osamu Tezuka, for those who don't know, is known as the godfather of manga. They wrote so much stuff, and well known for Adolf, a story about multiple people named Adolf, one of whom is Adolf Hitler. It's a very interesting story about differences between people and, yeah, racism and bigotry. There's one called Moo, which is, again, deals with bigotry and xenophobia, but using them transforming into dogs to kind of and this is a game basically about a non-binary character. It's about someone who was born with the heart of a boy and also the heart of a girl, and even though it's quite fantastical and quite whimsical, and there in the first half of the story there were some bits that was but it was done in 1953, so you've got to forgive the author for not being totally woke. But I'm really excited to read this, and it smells good. Anyway, so Princess Knight, that is also my thing. Hello, Yoda. It is lovely to see you. Elaine says, as someone who worked in a library for a long time, I always found sniffing books odd. I enjoy having my senses entertained. I like tasting things. I mean, if it wasn't unhealthy for me, I would, and potentially, a carry of germs and stuff, I would put a lot more things into my mouth. I'm not going to lie. And yes, there are some library books that smell quite horrendous. Maybe because, people, I don't know where people read them. Um, and I came across it because of um, yeah, I'm just going to say Vicky Dalton, amazing artist who also works in board games, child of Alan and Charlie Paul, gave me a bunch of comics. They were very kind. And one of them was the first half of Princess Knight. And I was like, yeah, I love comics. Please give me all your comics if you're getting rid of them. But yes, I the I noticed that they were doing a reprint this year, so it just came out. And so, yeah, Vicky Dalton is amazing. And yeah, sharing stuff is amazing. Actually, that should be a brilliant thing of the day. Just sharing stuff like libraries, sharing your resources. Once I've read this, I've told my friends that they can all borrow it. And someone's already said, yes, I want to borrow it after you finish it. Hello, Timmy. It is lovely to see you. I will answer that on a different day. But very quickly, 2 p.m. events, me personally. I'll be at the Norwegian stand, chatting to publishers, pitching my games. If I don't get, I'm hoping to get at least one thing signed. That's basically the primary thing, and I also get to have dinner with people. And hello, Josie. It is lovely to see you. So, yes, I will crack on with the main topic, which is how do I make games? Yes, how do I start making games? Well, I start with an idea, and the ideation, it has to be something that all along the process, I'm basically thinking, why am I doing this? And I have to be able to answer that question more and more concretely. And if I'm saying that I am doing this because I am curious about it, that's totally okay. So something has to be different. I'll just read out my words that you might. Something has to be different. It has to be. It doesn't mean that it has to be fundamentally different to the market. It's okay for me to just say, you know what? I've never made a social deduction game. I am curious about making a social deduction game. What's a vague rule of social deduction game that I could make? Let's play test it, because then I get the joy of doing that. And there is a joy of playtesting, don't get me wrong. And sometimes I do make things just because I really enjoy making things and then getting them playtested. But I'll have something in my head, something that, whether it's something that I've not personally worked on before, something that, oh, this is popular in the marketplace, what's a twist that I can do on that? Or maybe it's just something about the game. So previously, some examples. During this, I'm going to talk about Yogi. I'm going to talk about a game about selecting 7 cards speedily, searching for synergies. And I'll talk about, this last one doesn't have a title. I'm going to call it Abstract for short. So the Abstract game is a game about making shapes to get superpowers, to get bigger shapes, to make better superpowers, and then the best superpowers let you make this 3x3 triangle, and then you win the game. But someone else is trying to stop you. This is currently the way it works. But I'll talk about these 3 projects because one is my first thing, which shows you how I started off. One is my last published game, and one is something that I'm working on just now. And oh my gosh, hurricane coming. That sounds horrendous. Stay safe to me. Lots of love. So yeah, ideation. So for Yogi, the way that I started was, there was a person called Danish Frank, and Danish Frank made a game called Unfair. And in Unfair, there was lots of stuff going on. You were stealing cards from other people. You were giving cards to other people. It was kind of it had the chaos of something like Flux, and was like, oh, this is exciting. And could I make something like that? I would be excited to make these cards. And it was the prospect of making my own cards for a similar system was what excited me. And they moved away. I reached out to them to ask if that was okay. But you can tell that that initial inspiration bears no resemblance to how Yogi started off. Like I keep saying, well, I get the first prototype literally only had one card that had anything to do with physicality. Conversely, a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, that came when I was playing another drafting game, and I was thinking, ooh, this is a bit slow. We're all taking turns to draft. I've made my decision. I basically know what I'm going to do next turn, and it's the turn to the player on my left. And I need to wait for them. And then I need to wait for that person, and then that person. Oh, this is too long. I wish there was something that was a bit faster. And then that's where that started. And then I was thinking, oh, I've enjoyed Kawaii. Kawaii is a game that's brought in a little bit of real time. Maybe I can mix them together, combine those two, and make it my own thing. You might also then my abstract, as I'm going to call it, it was inspired by just placement. It was, okay, let's work out some vague thing of placing things on a board. I want to make an abstract game. I've not done a lot of that. Hey, let's print out a thing and try to make some shapes. My inspiration is just, I like games where you place stuff on a board. And so maybe other people would play a game by me where you place stuff on a board. By the way, is anybody watching? Because suddenly my counter went to 0 folks, so I'm not sure if there's a technical issue. I don't know if I'm still streaming. So please let me know if you can still hear and or see me. Oh, thank you, Bodhi. Thank you, Timmy. Yeah. Okay, that's really weird. I think that StreamYard is just having some sort of issue with the number, but it seems like the streaming is working. Awesome. Anyway, so maybe you're thinking about having a twist on something. Maybe you're thinking about the name, couple. I made all these games for the L deck, and then we named them Wibble, Phrasal, Fable, Grabble. And it's like, well, what other words would there be with an L sound at the end? Oh, couple, that sounds interesting. That's what would that be like? That sounds like a cool name. Maybe it's my own curiosity to just, what would it feel like to do that? And to have that joy of trying out new cards. Maybe I'm trying to make a simpler version of something that already exists. Maybe I'm trying to find a more complicated version, fusing together dexterity and memory. Maybe trying to fuse together a judge-based game and a speed game. Maybe I'm trying to fuse together 2 things that already exist. Or maybe I've got some brand new mechanical twist. Maybe there's something totally physical that I'm like, ooh, I've got this physical component. What could I do with it? And then you make a big thing at the center. But the key thing is to just start. It doesn't really matter how you start. You need to start and then keep going. You can start by making variations for a game that already exists. You can start, and the thing that obviously I want to repeat, this is just the way that I work. It might not be the way that you work, but the important thing is start and keep going. At this point, I will ponder the framework. I'll be like, how would that go? What would a turn look like? What am I doing on my turn? How does my turn advance the game? There are some games where a turn typically doesn't advance the game at all, and that's totally okay. A typical party game, there might be an atom of the game where you do that thing, and then it repeats. I mean, in a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after some X noises, there's no different from one turn to the next. In theory, someone could jump in right at the last turn or halfway through the game and are fine. They are probably going to get fewer points because they've missed out on the points from earlier on. But you get my meaning, right? And conversely, there are some games where you're building an engine and you can't get into that end bit of the game unless we fabricate and imagine, okay, well, we'll put you in exactly the same situation as this person and assume that you made all the same decisions, if that works. But it's about the culmination of all your decisions. So in Yogi, when I first started, I was, okay, what happens here? Let's say you play a card and then maybe you draw a card. Yeah, that's it. And I'm fairly sure that's how I started, because personally I enjoy drawing a card at the end of the turn as a default action more than drawing a card at the start. It gives you something to think about. It maybe provides anticipation, thinking, oh, I get to play this card unless someone steals it from me. And actually, that version of the game turned more into Cataclysm. And so pondering the framework for the first ever version of Yogi was just, okay, well, what are we playing to? I guess we've got points in your discard pile. That's your personal points. You've maybe got some points in front of you. You've got some enchantments and stuff that's affecting everything. And then maybe you've got some other cards that you put in front of other people. Maybe they've got points. Maybe they've got negative points. Maybe you've got some cards that, stay in your hand, and that's just worth nothing. You've got to play them in front of you. And then thinking, also, at this point, I will probably have a think if there's cards about what cards could possibly exist. Conversely, with a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, I was thinking, okay, I want to make it so that people are incentivized to do something quickly. How about if everyone flips over at the same? What if everyone flips over at the same time and then you need to grab? Okay, well, you clearly want to grab more and more. Well, what if there's a limit to how many cards you've got? 7 seems like a good number. And what if? So if you've got more in the market, how many should you be taking? Maybe that should be left up to the players. And the initial version of the game was very much flip over, then everyone either grabs or doesn't grab, and you only get to grab at most 3 times during the game. Conversely, Abstract, I had to ponder, okay, what are you trying to do? Maybe you're just trying to make a specific shape. Maybe this game is all about collecting cards. Maybe this game is about you trying to make shapes and the other player doesn't. That seems interesting. Maybe this is a game about you placing stuff for your color and the other person's color at the same time. That seems interesting. But how would it work if you were allowed to put them anywhere? If you're allowed to put them anywhere, you're going to put your things into one tight cluster, but then you put your opponents just anywhere on the board in this random area where it doesn't affect anything. That doesn't seem interesting. What if you what if you have to put them together to join? And then maybe I'll look at other games to get some inspiration. This isn't an essential thing, but then at that point I was thinking, what if there's a third color? What if you place one of your colors, one of the opponent's colors, and one neutral blocker into a little hexagonal triangle? That seems interesting. And then you've got to work out how to put yourself in a good spot and your opponent, even though they're right beside you, in a not so good spot. And that all have some emergent properties. And then this is the level that I try to get to whilst just pondering it in my mind. And hello, Johan, I hope that you are generally well. So yeah, pondering the framework, I'm trying to play through what matters in my head. I try to get a vague understanding of what you might be building up towards. I'll ponder the incentives. If someone's trying to win at all costs and are happy to be a jerk, what does that look like? I typically won't ponder someone just being a jerk for the sake of it. And that's not even necessarily a thing that I always play around or design around, but I want all my games, even the party games, to still work, even if people are playing very hard to win, if you know what I mean. Yeah, at this point, maybe I'll print out something, maybe I'll put some cubes around and do a bit of solo testing. When I say solo testing, I'm not even playing the whole game. I'm just moving things around, and I might, if it's a card game, move cards around. It doesn't matter what's on the cards. It just helps my mind internalize this and keep track of, okay, this is how the resources are going to work. And I'll think about, okay, again, keeping it in mind, why am I doing this? Am I doing this because it's interesting to me? Is this basically a luxury that I'm allowing myself? Am I doing this because I think it will be a good market fit? Am I doing this because I've got a message to tell? Am I doing this because I've got some particular person in mind? You've got to be honest about your desires for your games, because not everything is going to be financially successful. I mean, the game, which is, what's it now called, Aurora, which will be published by Surprise Star Games at some point, it's probably not going to be financially lucrative. Whereas, yeah, Yogi Party, if that ever comes out, that's likely to help me pay the rent. So I might, but yeah. So you've got to think about, why are you doing this? What is the interesting bit for the player? What is there an interesting bit at all? So now I go to prototyping. So let's get that banner up. Prototyping. This is making the physical thing. And for this, yeah, I wonder, hey, I've got, yeah, this is actually quite close to the end. So you can sort of see what level of graphical fidelity my prototypes tend to have. This was for Growbot Smash. This one over here is also basically right at the end. And this is, oh, this one really needs a name, because this is my next thing. This is a game about a judge deciding which thing best matches three descriptions. Yeah, I think that's how I'm going to name it. And so you've got descriptions on the back: old, full of life, clever, bright, and you have three descriptions on the table. And then I'll just mention that if I've got cards that I'm like, yeah, these don't quite work for the game, what I do is I make a little rip, because I'm a sentimental person. I like to keep my old cards. I don't like to rip them up and put them in the bin. But by having that little rip, I can see clearly, this is not a card I want to use in future. For whatever reason, I've decided that the earmuffs are not appropriate for this game. Maybe I decided that the earmuffs are not an interesting enough object. And whereas looking further down, I decided that a bird was a good object to have in the game, as is a mermaid. So I felt like those were slightly more interesting things. I've got a lot of blank cards. I've got two types of blank cards these days: double-sided white, where I use if I need to have games which have double-sided cards. I've also got these single-sided blank cards with a consistent back, which I use for single-sided games. And earlier on in my life, like 2014, when I was working on what would become Yogi, I was all about paper. So I would fold a bit of paper into 16ths. So that's quarter, eighths, 16ths. Just fold it up, unfold it, and then if you've got some good crease lines, then draw a little picture on each of these things. It is a bit smaller than a card, but if you can write it and make it legible there, it's going to be little enough information that it's okay for when it goes to big cards, if that makes sense. And that's the cheapest way to do prototypes. That's how I did the thing that would turn into Yogi. And sometimes you don't need hidden information. The cards might just be a way of, okay, here's a bunch of stuff, and it's just the first thing. Literally let people play with bits of paper. You're going to change it after this playtest anyway. Who cares? And if you need a board, draw it on a bit of paper. If you need like little chits, if you've got a cardboard box, I don't know, you know what a cardboard box looks like. I've used cereal boxes. It's good if you've got at least one side that has a consistent color. Use bits from other games. As a designer, I think it's worth buying basically any game if you can get it cheap enough. Like, I went through nowadays I would be a bit more discerning, but I went through a long phase where any game, if it costs £2 or less, I would just buy it no matter what. And buy it for the bits, buy it for the cards, and then you can put in cards into sleeves and paper in front of the sleeves for the slightly nicer cards. Although again, nowadays I just use these and it is marginally more expensive, but yeah, I allow myself blank cards as a business expense and I go through I have enough that I'm never worried about running out. I try to keep a few hundred in to hand. What else to say about prototyping? Blank cards, paper. I might use pencil before I do it in marker pen or pen, but I'll typically just write in pen at this point, especially for a first playtest. Don't worry about if you want to draw a stick person, do it. All I worry about is making it legible. I will personally try to avoid joined up writing. That's a quick tip. If you do not joined up writing, your handwriting will instantly be so much more legible and people will be able to read it better. So that's what I would advise. A game about, is working with cards easier than paper? Playing with cards is a lot easier with paper. The reason I do that is primarily for the benefits of my playtesters. With paper, if I were playtesting myself solo, I would probably still, if I needed 32 cards, for example, or 48, well, I mean, it's in 16, so I have 16 bits. I would still sometimes go back to paper just for cost, and mentally, it allows myself to be okay with throwing it away literally 20 minutes later. That's the Bodhi says, I like the argument for rough prototyping versus polish because if it's low effort, you're more likely to be comfortable chucking it to the side and reworking it. Yes, ultimately, do whatever is fastest for you. Some people like to print. I actually find that for me, the time that I spend drawing onto cards is actually faster than it would take me to do all the layouts and everything and get it on. Yeah. B, while I'm drawing on the paper, that's also conducive to me pondering about it. And I'm glad that all makes sense. Obviously, once you've prototyped, the next step is the first playtest. Some people do full games on their own. I tend not to do this because I'm really not a fan of solo playing in general, so it will be draining for me. The only reason why I do solo playtests is either if I'm really unsure about something and I'm more than 50% sure that it's just going to collapse, or if, look, don't abuse your playtester's time. Don't take that for granted. But if you're going to a playtest event and if you're reciprocating, then for that hour or for that hour and a half or however long you get, that is your time. It's whatever is most useful to you. So if you think that it's most useful to you to just skip the solo playtesting and go there, and that's going to give you more information, that's how I do it, because I get to see the emotions of other people. Watching other people gives me that inspiration. I will make changes along the way. I will see someone and I'll notice that, oh, they're blocking that free, but I should really make this as an alternative shape that they can make. So yeah, for Yogi, the first playtest was a mess, and 98% of the cards, roughly, because there were about 58 cards, maybe 48, and that first playtest, one of the cards was physical. They were all extremely complex, and one of the playtesters said, hey, if you want to make a physical game, make it silly and wacky, do that. If you want to make a game about passing all the cards, maybe keep out the physical thing. They don't quite work together, but it seems like you want to make a super silly game. And they basically gave me permission, even though I shouldn't have needed it. And J Guard says some games are also really hard to solo test. Yes, absolutely. Games that are about emotions, about bribery, about lying, about hidden information, about evaluation, about judges. Yeah, you can't solo test those things. Even an abstract thing, sure, I can say, okay, this is what I would do, this is what that player might do. But then even putting yourself into these two different perspectives does take a certain amount of skill. But yeah, so during that first playtest, I ask my playtesters, don't worry about breaking the game. I'm not so worried about the feedback. Honestly, I just need you to play it. This is a crash and burn. That's what we call games when we are unsure if it will even work. We try the game, maybe it will crash and burn, or maybe it won't. But we are preparing our playtesters for that possibility. I might say, oh, this is the first time it's been played, but I think that this should work. Or I might say, this is the first time that, like, for tomorrow, I am going to be making a game involving area activation. After my discussion with Alan Paul yesterday and being inspired at the end, I want to make a brand new game. Now, it's a strategic game. There's a lot more going than I can quite compute in my mind. I'm sure that I'll be doing lots of soul testing. I've told myself I'm going to work until maybe 1 or 2 o'clock on that, and then as a kind of time off, I get to do the design, because design is kind of the reward for me. I mean, the other stuff is the boring stuff that I just have to do. Illustration and publishing stuff and posting stuff. I mean, yeah, that's and contacting publishers. That's the boring stuff that I don't enjoy. But yeah, the ideation, the prototyping, the pondering, that's what I love. Anyway, so I examine the behavior. I think about how people are behaving. I think again about what they're incentivized to do. And I allow myself to change things during the test. Fundamentally, key things that I can say during a playtest: don't try not to speak too much. That's the first mistake I see new game designers making. Never be defensive. Some game designers, if someone says, oh, it felt like I just couldn't win at this point, and then I've heard a designer literally take then 5 minutes to explain how the person could have done this and that and that, and then they probably would have won. Well, great, but that doesn't take away from the fact that that person felt like they couldn't win. Maybe you want to ask them why they felt like this. What did they feel like? Yeah, how bad was it? Like, don't invalidate people's feelings. Frankly, feelings and emotions are almost more important than mathematical reality. It doesn't matter if I've actually got a 60% chance of winning, if in my mind I've got a 5% chance of winning. I'm still going to feel a bit sad. I'm still going to feel a bit despondent. I'm still going to feel a bit, oh. And yeah, the feelings are more important than the reality. And I know that's a weird thing to say for games which are strategic and very mathematical, but yeah, I hope that makes sense. Anyway, so yeah, listen to your playtesters, but also the second thing that, and I'm glad it's a good piece of advice, the second piece of advice I'll have about playtesting is guide their feedback. You are not just there to ask them, hey, what did you think about it? Tell me everything that you think, and then listen to all their thoughts. That's also not useful, because that's a waste of their energy to tell you literally all their thoughts. That's a waste of, during that time, you could be like, direct their thoughts. If you've already understood what they're saying, then thank them for that. Make sure that they know that you're being appreciative, but then, close that channel. Ask if they would be happy to play again. If you're able to make some quick tweaks, maybe draw up some new cards and iterate, or ask them, or maybe you've got another game that you want to test that same day or that same hour, whatever. I mean, that's the advantage of having multiple games. I'm never going to be short of games to playtest at this point. If you ask me, hey, Bez, can I playtest one of your games? I'll say, absolutely. Which one? And I'll offer you a choice. I might offer you the choice of the one that I think might crash and burn. And then if it does crash and burn, then either I'll say, oh, it should work like this, and then make some changes. Would you be willing to? Or I might say, oh, well, how about this other thing that I actually know will work? And yeah, during that first playtest, at the end, again, you're thinking, what is the interesting bit? Is there an interesting bit? And then you make some more decisions about what you're trying to do. At the end of it, think, okay, is there a market for this? Am I making this because I think there's a big market? Am I making this because I think I'm trying to make because I want to make a statement? Frankly, Seize the Power is a lot of that. It's a game about bigotry and discrimination, and it's a game that once... I'm slightly sad because Inside the Box, for those unaware, basically had to go into hibernation a while ago, and obviously Tiz and I got to hear about it before the public announcement, but now it's public, and that's a bit sad. But at some points we might get the rights back, and I might do it in an actually cheap-ass style way where we say, yeah, here are just the cards, you also need money, you also need cubes, supply your own money and cubes and you can play the game. But make it that way, so then eventually, hopefully, you can find another publisher to work with, or maybe Inside the Box will recover. I would keep my fingers crossed, because honestly, I really like Peter. Peter's amazing, and Peter's one of the most genuine, forthright people around. Anyway, make more decisions about my aims. So at this point, with Yogi, my aim was to make a game I could put onto Kickstarter. My aim was to make a game that was a deck of cards. That was my primary goal. My secondary goal was, okay, within that, there's a whole bunch of different directions I could go, but I think I've worked out, after that playtest, this one card, which is all about the physicality, I'm going to pursue that. I'm going to pursue physical stuff, running around the table, jumping up, doing sit-ups. Like at the start, it was a lot more intense. I'm going to put in cards where everyone has to make a noise, and then they have to keep making that noise literally as long as they can without taking a breath. And then you get some sort of extra cards. Do this. And then I'm pursuing this physical, vocal silliness that you can only get in real life, not in a video game. I'm embracing that physicality. Then for a game about selecting 7 cards, speedily searching for synergies, after that first playtest, it was like, okay, this seems to be working. And my aim is to make yeah, another busy bargain bag because I've already made a few of these. It seems to be a framework that I can make. I need components-wise, it needs to be 54 cards. And so I'm going to have one card for the front cover and instructions, one card for the back cover and instructions, and I've got 52 cards to play with, potentially 51 if I want an advert in there. And yeah, now I need to think about how the cards combine and what are my aims with this. I don't know if this will ever be a mass market thing, but this feels like something I'm doing because I personally really want this game to exist, because I really want there to be a speed version of Sit Collect. That was my aim and my goal. And so like one of them was more financially motivated, one of them was more, I want this game to exist. And, you know, to be fair, the financially motivated one has done fairly well for me financially. And in abstract, at the end of that first playtest, it was like, I don't know if there's a market for this. It's an abstract game, but it also has cards, so I can't offer it to Nestor Games or Gigamic or the people who make nice components. It doesn't feel like there's enough going on for it to be a big game like the Project Hell type thing, but maybe it'll have a publisher, but I don't know. I don't know any publisher right now off the top of my head who'll take it. But why am I doing this? Because I am enjoying exploring that possibility space as a designer. And that's totally okay. Not every game needs to be published. Sometimes I've made games in the past where I kind of know that it's probably not going to be published. Like the social deduction game I made. And then there was a game also that I made about growing trees, and it was a really nice game. A whole bunch of people enjoyed it, but then there was a tactile issue that made it a bit fiddly that I thought, yeah, I've worked out the strokes of what this game should be. I'm not fundamentally, either I need to be really enjoying it for my own sake, or maybe I'm being paid to do it, in which case, obviously, I'm going to continue. Maybe I think it's going to be something that I'll get money for. Maybe it's something that I'm like, oh, I'm super excited for this to exist. Like, the whole reason I made a game about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures, is that I saw lots of speed games, lots of games where things get revealed and then you do something quickly, and I was thinking, okay, what's a new sort of connection that you can make? Well, you can count things, you can, oh, what if there were cards that described other things with words? That would be interesting. And then once I had that, my motivation for making that is so that I could pitch it to one of the publishers at Cannes. And it did actually go fairly well, the pitching, but then it was COVID that got in the way of that. And J. Guard says, yeah, I also roughly categorize my designs as either commercial or personal / artsy. And obviously things can mutate, and you have to kind of allow yourself some luxuries. If you're not allowing yourself some whimsy, why are you doing this? There has to be a sense of commercial realities. Again, not everything has to be published. And then you get into and so that's why am I even progressing? And that's something that you need to regularly come back to. Why am I doing this? Finally, I say finally because this feels like the end of the design process. Iteration. Remake. So, well, there's a possibility that I just want to acknowledge that there's a possibility that I might not redo these things. I'm actually going to open up a folder to see if I can. Well, 2015.1a I was really proud of that. It was a game about magical fighting and activation of different areas and saying, yeah, these peeps are going to do this and this dramatic special effects because I've got dominance here and I've got area control, and that got to a really late stage, and eventually I was like, yeah, it's not exciting me. I'm not sure I'll be able to publish this. I'm not sure, can I pitch this? about knowing the realities of what's going on. I would say like 1 in 10 makes it past the ideation stage, because I'll have a lot of quick ideas, but then like I do start with something, and then 1 in maybe 10 makes it past the pondering the framework stage. Once I've actually pondered the framework, I am always going to prototype it and do that first playtest. Like if I've got, oh, here's a set of rules. Actually, when I say always, when I say pondering the framework, that I'm assuming that I'll have worked out a framework that might have some value to it, because I could easily ponder 1,000 frameworks today that are either derivative or clearly terrible. But then after the first playtest, then when it gets to that iteration, I will say about 50%, maybe 40%, maybe around 50% of the games make it to the second and third playtest if I've done at least one. And then I would say about, right now, 50% of those games make it to publication in some form. Bearing in mind, I am able to self-publish and it's fairly cheap, and I am able to do things in a print-on-demand way, where literally the cost for, yeah, I do 50 copies and I'm probably going to sell out. Good morning, Michael. I hope you're generally well. And yeah, I've just gotten to the end of the design process, which is the iteration. So do all those things over again. Make a new prototype. Maybe you make some edits to the prototype. Playtest it. While you're playtesting, think about what you're looking for. Are you just checking out to see how people are playing it? Are you trying to learn more about how people play it? Are you trying to evaluate the fun and get a better sense of whether it's even fun? Are you trying to hone in on this aspect? Like, you can mutate it, and then once you've done it, again, think about what's the fun part, what's the interesting part, why are you doing it, then try to hone in on that. Remake it, playtest it, ponder it, remake it, playtest, ponder, remake. You get the gist. And this iteration is the heart of the creative process. And yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say about the design. Now, because publishers are looking for something with a little bit of development in there, even if I'm pitching to publishers, I would try and develop it somewhat. And if I'm publishing it myself, of course, I'm going to go a little bit further. So at this point, I'll really start thinking more about the individual cards. I'll be thinking more about, okay, what's the possibility space? What special effects can I have in here? And I'll be thinking more potentially about the balancing and the numbers. And even though if I'm pitching, like, ideally, if it's a strategic game, I would love for a publisher to do a lot more iteration on it with me. You can't always rely on that. So if I'm pitching to a publisher, I want it to be in a stage where I would be reasonably happy for it to be published as is. I wouldn't be embarrassed by it. It has to be that level of quality where it doesn't have to be my best ever game or a game that I'm immensely proud of, but just something I'm not embarrassed by. I know that seems like a really low bar, but I'm easily embarrassed by having games that, yeah, I might, if I'll start thinking more about graphical design, even if I'm pitching to a publisher, I want the cards, if I've spent hundreds of hours pondering a game, I'm probably more in a place to understand what is good graphical design, what makes sense for this game. Are the cards going to be held in hand? Do you need little bits to be on the sides of the cards? Maybe, maybe not. Are the cards going to be down on the table? Are you going to have to see them from far away? What is the primary bits of information? I mean, here, the primary bits of information, like, there's no hierarchy between the picture and the text. Frankly, all of these are lipstick, jumper, Eiffel Tower, hedgehog, pyramids of Giza, and that seems to be one of the ones that I decided I would keep in the game. So yeah, the illustration is going to take more of the card real estate, and frankly, it means that someone who isn't able to read would still be able to play the game if the illustrations are clear. And hopefully from that illustration, I mean, I did all these illustrations in about 30 seconds. I'm not expecting them to be the best ones, but as I keep going, as I remake the cards, I'll think, okay, what makes sense? And does it make sense for these to be this way around? Does it make sense for the cards to be landscape? Normally, people intuitively put card portrait mode, but consider it. Consider some landscape cards. Consider it. Ponder it all. And that will get me either ready to do a self-publication of a busy bargain bag, or it might get me ready to be able to pitch it in a manner that allows the potential publisher to share my vision, if you know what I mean. And this is where I finish up the game, and this is well beyond the development. If I'm publishing it myself, of course, I then do the illustration, scanning, pre-production. I am lucky enough that I've got a budget that I can pay someone else to help me with the scanning, pre-production, and then I pay someone else to do the printing. That's something that very few people do themselves. And I do the sales all myself, basically, at conventions, at some of them online, some of them like via my own web shop, some of them via Kickstarter, and occasionally I actually get I used to always keep copies of In a Bind, the game that turned into Yogi, in my bag, because when I would go to places, I would sometimes bring it out and people, oh, can I buy this? And I'd say, hey, I've got some copies in my bag, and if they wanted to buy it, then I would sell it to them right there and then. But yeah, I don't do that with my games anymore. Maybe I think since it's actually before COVID, I stopped playtesting and demoing them random places so much. Back in the day, in 2015, 2016, I would do a lot more meeting strangers in the pub or in the park. And I think that especially nowadays, people are a bit more hesitant to interact with strangers after COVID and everything. But also there is... And so, yeah, hopefully that's all given you a vague idea of how I design. Some of it is probably true for a lot of designers. Some of it might be more personal to me. Hopefully some of it was useful to listen to you. If you've got any questions, then please go ahead and ask. But first, I'm going and get your questions in the next minutes or two. First, I'm going to ask my question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Yeah, I mean, my real question is just to solicit the questions. Like, what would you like me to talk about next? To solicit more topics for when I'm... Yeah, my real question is kind of what questions do you have for me? Because I will answer any question, any respectful question, I should say. But my question for you is, where do you keep your keys? Yeah. Where do you keep your keys? When you come in, assuming you're coming into your house, and then you unlock your door, and then you walk in, do you have a hook where you put your keys? Do you keep your keys in your jacket pocket? Do you put your keys on a table? Do you have a specific spot? I'm trying to keep my keys just beyond the door, so it's visible when I go outside, so it's easy to access when I come in. It's like a little level surface. It's not a table, it's actually a bunch of boxes. But yes, I'm putting it on a bunch of boxes which are just beyond the door, so that if I'm going out, I will hopefully remember to take my keys with me. And if I swap jackets, or if I'm not wearing a jacket, then I will still remember to take my keys with me. So where do you put your keys? And Bodhi says, my keys are in my left pocket while I'm out, then in a little ceramic dish on the kitchen bench at home. Kitchen, wow. Isn't that awfully far from your door? And J-Fool's guard and Josie says, I have a small bag where all the keys for mine and other people's houses are kept. It's nearish the door. I mean, I'm assuming this isn't for everyone's house in the world, just like the few select individuals who have entrusted you with their keys. So, questions for me. My apartment is maybe 10 meters across. Yeah, probably same, but I'm very lazy, and also I'm very forgetful. So unless my keys are literally on display right at the door, and even then, I will forget it. Thankfully, I've got a neighbour who can let me in. And Josie says, about 5 people's houses. So, questions for me. How polished are my games when pitching? I touched on it briefly. The truth is, I've not done a lot of pitching in my day. And I would mechanically, again, I would say I want the game to be in a state where if it was published this way, I don't mean that level of graphical fidelity, I mean with that text, that general cards layout, that information, if nothing changed mechanically, I would be happy for this to be published. I would be very happy with that. I will do some of what I personally consider development because I feel like it's a skill I have, and I feel like that's an asset that I can bring to a publisher to hopefully get my games more likely to be picked up. I will potentially publish my games before pitching them. I published Yogi, although back then it was called In a Bind, and I sold a few thousand copies. And then Jigamic was like, yeah, that's fine. We don't care that you've sold a few thousand copies because we can print hundreds of thousands of copies. And sure enough, they have. And similarly, I have pitched Categorical as an individual game. And if that happened, like there's sub-licensing royalties that I would give to Tom Cauldron, but I very much consider it something that I've signed, and it's 10%. Typically, you'd give some percentage of royalty when publishing it as a publisher. That's me acting as a publisher, but a higher percentage if you then sub-license it because I'm doing less work. So all 100% of my income from that would be profit. So therefore I can afford to give more to Tom. I have pitched all. I am going to pitch. I have either pitched or will pitch all of my Busy Bargain bags to other publishers. I expect all of them to be picked up by someone at some point, because it doesn't matter if I sold a few hundred. If, frankly, me selling less than 1,000 is going to mean that a publisher doesn't want to work with me anymore, they were probably too small for me to bother with, because if someone's going to print 5,000-10,000, me doing it in a very small print-on-demand way should not matter. Conversely, if I manage to already have an existing relationship with someone, then it's like, oh, this would be good for them. This is what I'm making for them. And actually, the original version of a game about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures, I can't remember what there was definitely a bed in there, but I literally thought of the game and, oh, wait a minute. Apparently my there we go. Now it's I thought of the game, playtested it, confirmed that it worked, and that it didn't need any more stuff done to it. Then, I mean, it didn't have the fancy double effect cards, but it was every image has two qualities, color and style. And I think back then it might have been dark blue, pink, and yellow, because you need to keep the shades different for accessibility. But then I'd pondered that, I thought about that, and I gave it to them with really rubbish artwork. But yeah, even though it had only been playtested literally twice, when I showed it to two different companies, it was in a state where it felt very strong. It felt, again, I don't know how to put this, but fundamentally, I hope that explains things. Make it as I personally make it in a state where I would not be embarrassed by it being printed in that quality. I expect them to totally redo all the artwork. I expect them to touch up the graphic design and layout, but I don't take it for granted that a publisher will change any of my rules without me seeing that. You'd hope that the people conducting pitches are able to envision the game without super perfectly prototyped stuff. Sure, but again, for me, the mechanics and even if there's a lot of content, so for example, it has to be in the ballpark. Again, these were not correct, but if it had been printed with earmuffs, it's not like it would have been a bad game that I'm ashamed of. It's just that earmuffs are not the most exciting thing. And I decided that for whatever reason, like maybe they'll come back, but I wasn't too sure about them. And you're very welcome. When will I talk about Essen? I don't know. Do I have to say right now? I've got I've got Sunday. I'm definitely the second. I'm planning to talk about Essen preparation. Potentially 27th if people want that. I don't have anything planned for the 27th. Yeah, 27th. But yeah, there was another question. Do I make digital files for my game? Sometimes. I will very rarely make, unless I'm actually publishing it, I will very rarely make printable files for my game. The only reason for me to, I'm sure there's an exception, but I can't think of a time that I've ever made digital files of my game unless it's a case of this is the final artwork and these are the files. I basically never make digital files on the one thing that I do, I will sometimes make a spreadsheet or a text document. I'm not sure if I can actually share can I share? No, I can't share everything, but actually I'll share my entire screen, which I almost never do, but there's nothing on my screen that I'm bothered about. So here, this is, as you can see, I've got a whole bunch of text files open at the same time. I've got literally hundreds open. That's the way my mind works. And this is the official document for Yogi Party. And yeah, this might or might not be the thing. So I guess I'm not sure. I feel like it's so. These are some other cards that I thought of that for whatever reason I want to not having the deck, I assumed that I'm allowed 60 cards because that's how many I had for Yogi Guru. I mean, it's as a speculative design. They haven't asked me for doing this. It's not on spec. It's not to their specifications. Yogi Guru was actually on spec because Yogi had done well enough that they said, hey, we want a sequel. Make us a sequel, please. Whereas this time it's me saying, hey, the game is starting to sell a bit less. Maybe now is the time to push into this silly speech and stuff that you said you didn't want to do in the first couple of decks. So I started off by writing out a whole bunch of cards from Bind Junior, and then I thought about, okay, what else can I do? And I did a whole bunch more stuff. I tried to avoid repeats, although I do have 2 duplicates in the deck, these ones. I thought very hard about what things you could touch, like the upper lip. Seems funny even if you keep it there. Exactly one finger is a really interesting one because then you actually need to balance it, although it is easier if you do it there, and potentially if you've got like something touching the earlobe, you could jam that in like that. So they do potentially combo. But yeah, as I got towards the end, I was thinking, okay, I decided I want to have no green cards, so that's my way of trying to make it slightly simpler. So it's only cards that you balance on stuff, or cards that this one green card, the box touching elbow, and everything is either before you draw a card or when you read a card. This is basically the master list. This is how it finishes up. And I'm not going to print out these things. It's not a printable file. That's not the purpose of the game. Let me stop showing that. Remove. There we go. I hope that was somewhat interesting. When I'll use a spreadsheet is typically if either it makes more sense visually, like if it's double-sided cards, then I'll have one column for one side of the card and then another column for the other side of the card. So it just makes it easier to parse that information. The other time that I'll always use spreadsheets is if it's if the numbers matter, or if, yeah. And even then, I never made digital files for this. I just kind of drew them on bits of paper and then wrote on the bottom of each thing what they should be roughly and tried to work out the average. But with a spreadsheet, you can then quickly say, okay, what's the average number of points per card? What's the average number of cards drawn per card in like Kitty Cataclysm, where I want to make sure that the cards you are drawing it's going to get you through the deck. I want to make sure that, so a card on average should draw you more than one card. So I want to keep the game going typically, and I want running out of cards to be something that you need to work for rather than something that automatically happens. So yeah, spreadsheets are good, but yeah, hope that makes sense. Awesome. I'm glad that was interesting. And if there's any other questions, let me just go back. It sounded like I only make a physical prototype. Yes, that is true. I basically never print stuff out. How many dishes containing peanuts have I eaten this week? Technically none on this. Look, I don't tend to cook with peanut butter, as it tends to just be a treat. So here's a spoon of peanut butter. I've probably tasted about 6 peanut butters this week. Oh yeah, actually, recent highlights. I made a nice meal last night, and that is all the questions. Awesome. Well, I hope that was useful to you, and now it is over to you. What are you up to? You can share a button if you want to. So what are you up to? I am going to skedaddle out and have a quick walk. I find that I smile when I take a walk outside, just a quick walk around the block. It doesn't need to be a quick thing. It just means that I get outside and I get bits of wind on my face and I feel like, boom. And I'm going to possibly go to a Pret. I'm going to cycle there, like a brand new one. I don't know where. I'm sure there's multiple within 20 minutes of me. And then I'll go there with the laptop, work, try to do my emails and my Essence stuff, do a couple of hours work, and then come back home to do all the fun design stuff that I get to do. And yeah, that's what I'm excited to share. If I'm doing any illustration, it will be back here to recap and wrap up before we finish up. When you make a game, start with an idea. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be the name, it can be a mechanic, it can be like theme, it can be an experience, it can be simplification of something else, it can be combining two other things, whatever sparks your curiosity. And it doesn't need to be marketable. It's, especially for your first game, don't worry about, I mean, even now, I don't necessarily worry, is this a game I can easily sell? Is this a game I can necessarily self-publish? Is it a game I can necessarily pitch to a company? I don't worry about, like, sometimes you've got to allow yourself to have fun, because if this isn't enjoyable to do, why the heck are you doing it? Just start, do it. Ponder what people will be doing on their turn. Ponder, like, the atom. Like, is it a party game where one turn, like one round, it's just repeat, repeat, repeat? Is there like some throughput where, frankly, even like a party game where it's like, there's an escalation, and then you need to kind of think about, okay, well, like at this point, I'll be working out the maths of this game even before I prototype. I'd be thinking, how likely is it to have a match? How likely do I want it to be to have a match? And I will do some maths, which, talking about digital assistants, I might use the spreadsheets at that point just to work out probabilities, because then I can plug in different numbers into different fields, and then it will work out the probability for me on the fly if I've set up a formula in one of the things to say, this is this number divided by this number plus this number, because you need to understand probability, so I can understand this is how many shapes I want, this is how many colors I want, and therefore there will be this amount of likelihood of there being a match. And that will, boom, get me into the right ballpark if the game is simple enough. And make the prototype, play it, ponder it, feel free, especially if it's something that you're not. Some games I'm fully certain about, I've got a cohesive understanding of. Some I'm just, I don't know. Try it, please. And I'll probably have to make tweaks along the way. Sorry about that. At the end, make decisions about my aim. Why am I doing it? Iterate, keep doing it. Remake it, playtest, ponder, remake, playtest, ponder. Maybe you remake, playtest, ponder, remake, playtest, ponder. And, you know, you don't need to remake every time. Tweak. Sometimes just cross out thing and redo it. I mean, even here, I'm trying to find something that I've... Oh, just the front card. Even there, like, you can see that one of those pencils was hand-drawn. So this, well, technically they were all hand-drawn, but that one's not printed on the card. And similarly, I added a little wine glass because I decided the sketch artist needed more wine glasses. Yeah, start thinking about it and getting more and more specific. At this point, you should know what you're doing. So this is my recap. And yeah, what are you up to? Let me know. And if you want to check me out, obviously, I'm Stuff by Bet in all the places, and stuffbybet.com/streams will tell you about all my future streams. So let me check. I've let you down. I'm sorry, Josie. I'm sorry that I'm not eating enough peanuts. Drumming this evening after a day of research and working. That sounds amazing. Oh man, I didn't realize you do drumming. What kind of drumming? I'm excited by that. J Fool's Guard, I'm working on Essence stuff, and then maybe going bouldering, washing clothes, then writing a D&D adventure. That sounds awesome. Hello, Xate. It is lovely to see you. And apparently, Xate had a fun emergency dentist visit. I'm going to assume that this is sarcasm. But yeah, I hope that everything's okay with you. Lots of love, and I hope, yeah. And And you're going there too. I guess I'll see you there. But yeah, share, spread the word of this stream if you think that it's useful generally, and or you know someone else who might derive some use from this stream, then please let them know. Thank you everyone for being here. It has been a delight, and as always, you know, getting questions and conversations, it is the reason that I do these things live, because otherwise I would be doing it in a sad solo, and it, but oh, I'm doing this thing, and yeah, the reason I still stream after 761 shows, and not to mention all the afternoon and evening things I used to do, is because it gives me energy. So thank you everyone for being there and giving me energy and interacting with me and giving me some social interaction on a day when, frankly, yes, sure, I've got the tenuous social interaction with the person at the you know, coffee bar or someone on the street. And like, sure, when I'm walking along the streets, I say hello to a couple of people because that's the kind of person I am. But it feels like a different kind of connection with you all. So yeah, that is super lovely. It says we should plan a meetup for all the Twitch weirdos at Essen. Sure. Is there going to be a Loser-Palooza meetup? Thursday I'm spoken for, Saturday I'm spoken for, and Sunday's not a good day, so potentially Friday. Friday evening is the one day that I have. So if you organize something on Friday, I will almost certainly be there. So yes. The dentist apparently was very good, told say what was happening, why awesome. That is. Do I want to take Say to dinner? I mean, maybe. Oh, that sounds like a big responsibility. I don't know. I mean, I was thinking just hanging out. I mean, I was thinking it would be a bigger thing, but yeah, like if could get the loser crowd and J Fool's Guards and Yoda and stuff. I am staying at near the Hauptbahnhof, if I'm saying that correctly. Thank you, Bodhi. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to sign off now. And lots of love, so much love to you all. We can sort out this and stuff, Facebook Messenger or another day or whatever. Lots of love to you all. And yeah, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. And I am going to read today. If you're watching live on Twitch, if you're watching not live, this will make no sense to you. And it's who's streaming? Hearthstone, music, just chatting, music, just chatting. Let's check out the French people. Copy paste the raid message, please, and we are going to go to le stream. Au revoir, au revoir, au revoir. Ceci c'est les au revoir chansons. Au revoir, au revoir. Merci pour regarder mon stream. Au revoir, au revoir. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone. Bye, bye, Josie. Bye, bye, J Fool's Guards. And bye, bye, Xate and Bodhi and everyone else. Lots of love. Bye, bye. Bye, bye. Bye, bye.